Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai ki te hui o te committee i te ara waka e tēnei rā. Welcome everyone to today's Traffic Subcommittee meeting. The emergency procedures are shown on the screen. Please make yourself familiar. If you're feeling unwell, do not attend the meeting. In the event of a fire, 2 exits from chambers, one on the west wall and the other on the north wall onto the balcony, down through the clock tower. And on hearing a fire alarm, a democracy advisor will show you to the assembly point. In the event of an earthquake, please drop cover and hold until the shaking stops, then await instruction from a democracy advisor. And can all mobile phones be switched to silent mode, please? Opening formalities, karakia timatanga. Please join me in karakia, and it's on the screen. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. I hiaki, te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. Item number 2, apologies. And we have an apology for Councillor Gabriel Tupou, who has COVID. Are there any other apologies? Everybody's in. I move the motion that the apology for Councillor Gabriel Tupou be accepted and leave of absence granted. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Put the motion's been moved, seconded. I declare the motion carried. Moving on to item number 3, public comment, and we do have a few people in today. Just a reminder that speakers have 3 minutes to speak. And the first person up is Doug Brown. I'd like you to welcome you to the chair, please. Doug's going to speak to item 6I, broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times. Urunga Terrace, Wainuiamata.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug.
Yep. The road in question is 7.5 metres wide, which is the standard size for a lot of low volume roads in Wainuiamata. Council are suggesting that we need no parking lines on both sides of this section of road, and yet on all other roads that of similar size there are no such requirements. In your reply to my presentation, you sent this photo, which clearly shows there is sufficient room for vehicles to pass while there are 2 vehicles parked. The road is 7.5 metres wide. If the average car is 1.75 metres wide, if you've got 2 cars there, that's 3.5 metres, leaving 4 metres pavement width. Coptum NZTA standard requires for a 50k zone a minimum of 3 metres. We have 4. I suggest that there is no need for no parking lines at all. If you don't agree with that, then my second point would be maybe consider just no parking lines on the outbound lane side of the road. My other point was that no one normally parks on that outbound side lane of the road, and maybe a letter to the residents suggesting they don't park on that side of the road would be all that is required, rather than the addition of no parking lines. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. What we intend to do today is to bring your item up in the agenda, so we will deal with that once we've gone through our speakers. Before you sit down, I'm just going to see if any members have any questions of you. Councillor Mitchell, would you like to just go back to the mic, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Just in regards to your last point, writing a letter to ask people not to park on won't that achieve the same thing as what the yellow lines are going to achieve without people having to read a letter?
If you put yellow lines on both sides, you're inconveniencing the local residents who park there, and they're the only ones that park there. It's just the 3 or 4 local residents.
They're the same ones you're going to write a letter to and ask them not to park there, so the outcome will be the same.
Ask them not to park on the outbound side. If you look at this here.
So why wouldn't we just put yellow lines on the outbound side?
Well, you're proposing to put lines on both sides.
Okay,
And I don't see any need to put any lines in, but as a compromise, maybe lanes on the outbound
side.
lane would
Okay.
be sufficient.
Thank you.
That would leave you with something like 6 metres of road width for any vehicle to get through.
Yeah, and why the outbound side if the issue is vehicles?
The outbound side is because no one parks there anyway, because it's just a grass side. People park on the inbound side because that's where their houses are.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Doug. The next speaker is Kaz Young, representing the Petone Community Board, and she will be speaking on 6A Petone paid parking. Kaz will come in by Zoom. Kaz, you have 3 minutes.
Oh, tēnā koe. I'm just double checking actually if Mike is in the room because I thought we were going to do that jointly.
He is.
He is in the room and he's indicated that he wishes to speak after you or in conjunction with Kaz.
I can't hear what Mike just said.
He said whichever you want. He can speak with you or as a separate.
Oh, I just assumed we were doing it together. So if he could come to the table, that'd be great.
Would you like to come to the table, Mike? Thank you. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are some points we want to raise about the parking proposal for Petone, many of which you've heard before, but in particular I'd like to stress a couple today myself. Firstly, that in regard to Peel Place, that some consideration is given to the retention of some free parking there for library users, particularly those with mobility issues, or for the people who are using the laboratory services there. I realise it's hard to distinguish between the two, but some form of free parking we feel and the community feel is definitely warranted in Peel Place. That would then be similar to all other libraries, community hub areas in the city. The other point that I particularly want to raise, excuse me, is the question of where the revenue is exactly going to go. In the draft LTP document on page 43, the comment was made, the additional funding collected from Petone parking could be used to make improvements and upgrades to transport infrastructure on Jackson Street. In the Hutt News on July the 4th, Councillor Edwards was quoted by Nicholas Boyack as saying, the council had also been forced to introduce several unpopular items, including paid parking in Petone, to help pay for Three Waters upgrades. In a separate article on the 1st of August in the Hutt News, he was quoted as saying, quote, that's gone down like a cup of cold sick with families and businesses struggling with the cost of living crisis, but the alternative was another 1% on the already too high rates increase. So we are left a little confused as to whether there will be money, or I should say revenue set aside for Jackson Street improvements and upgrades to transport in particular. And we would ask that that be ring-fenced in any recommendation. Kaz?
And I guess in summary, like you possibly would have seen from our meeting, we were very much so against the proposal around paid parking, and a huge amount of that has come from the feedback that we have received from our community. And I think a number of times we've raised a number of concerns and questions which haven't fully been, I think, answered or that we're satisfied with in terms of ensuring that our community is kind of considered. And we've always thought about and talked about doing this whole process once and well. We only found out about that the parking strategy that's due to come in a bit later, but there could be a miss from us if we didn't come and advocate well for our community to actually, again, still try and push for us to have that delayed, because we don't think this process has been done well. Hence us not being able to recommend the number of recommendations that initially had come to our board meeting. And I guess we just want to see a really good process for our community, because at the end of the day, we're going to see those really, I think, negative impacts on a number of our people. And I guess that's why we want to stress that, to make you pause and consider and reflect, is this actually the best way to do this process?
Thank you very much, both of you. Members, do we have any questions of Kaz? Yes, Councillor Parkin.
There we go. Kia ora, thank you both for your presentation. A couple of questions. You mentioned the ring fence issue. The 1% amount that's quoted is from the total rates gain or revenue gain from parking. Do you know how much the amount is from Petone specifically? And if not, would you like me to ask officers to find that out? And the other part was, are you aware that there is still the 30-minute car parks being allocated for the library or for patrons next to the library that would still be remaining free?
With regard to the first question, although during the LTP process the figure changed, our understanding is the revenue quoted, and officers will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong, was $900,000. That was the last figure we heard. In regards to the free parks, there are the 30-minute parks facing in the little car park that faces off Britannia Street. But our main issue was, and while that may work okay for perhaps the laboratory users that I mentioned, the blood testing, etc., and quick drop-ins, a lot of the people who use the library, particularly for groups like adult colouring and other researchers in the Heritage Centre, etc., have a disability or are older and tend to use the parks out the back in Peel Place, whether they are the ordinary paid ones or the ordinary parks or the disability parks, and they tend to stay much longer. So the charges coming in for either of those types of parks, plus the length of time they're generally there, it would affect them more. So it's them in particular we're thinking of. We're aware that there are the 30-minute ones around from the Britannia Street, but we feel that there is still a need for some extra longer-term ones in Peel Place.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Kaz, do you have a question? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I just want to further add on to what Mike was saying. I guess I have kind of concerns around, well, we were told about the data set that revenue generation was based on as well, which isn't actually that pertinent to Petone itself. And so, in terms of that data set that all of that information's based on, I already have concerns around if that is going to be accurate anyway, in terms of if it was to be rolled out, then what that would that actually eventuate? I'm not fully convinced it would, particularly in this climate around cost of living and all those other dynamics. But also the argument that we've seen around not having Hill Street car park kind of treated separately and having them as free as they would be, used up by other people who would come from Jackson Street and decide to park there. And I think the argument for those 30-minute parks is going to be the same, actually. I think it's going to get more congested in that small snippet because it's considered free, even though it's for 30 minutes. So, I just question whether or not this has been really well thought out to factor in all those different dynamics.
Thank you, Kaz, and hopefully the officers will have some answers for you when it comes up for the papers presented. Any other members? Thank you, Councillor Dyer.
Kia ora, Kaz and Mike. I'm just wondering if you've got any thoughts on the proposal to drop the time limit from 4 hours down to 2 for Peel Street.
Off the top of my head, again, there will be those that would find that still, not enough time. Others would think, well, that probably will cover, the time I'm likely to be there for some shopping or whatever it might be they've parked there for. I suspect, again, off the top of my head, it'll be some of those library users and perhaps people who park there and then go around to the Lighthouse Cinema and, just filling in the timings of that. So it is pros and cons on both sides of the argument, just off the top of my head, Brady.
One of the things that I remember hearing as well from someone from our community was, irrespective of whether or not paid parking came in, they, still want to be dedicated to some of those activities, which would still take more than 2 hours. So for me, there is a concern around dropping that from 4 hours to 2 hours. Like, surely, if you're going to put in paid parking, you could still do it for 4 hours. So I just kind of, again, I think there needs to be some spaces that allow for people to utilise that as an option if it's something that, I don't want it to be that paid parking's a barrier anyway, but then we actually limit the amount of time that they can park so they can't even no longer, access those community activities that they would have, if that makes sense.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Parkin?
Kia ora, Kaz. One of the things that I'm hearing there is particularly around mobility. Just wondering if you're aware that actually if you have a mobility park, no, sorry, my apologies. I've just double checked the dates and times, and this one doesn't actually apply.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And of course, Karen. Kaz, thank you. Moving to item number 4, we have a petition from George Scott, being presented by George Scott and Catherine Gibbs on behalf of pedestrian safety on Waiheke Crescent in Woburn. It's page 7 of the agenda. If you'd like to come to the table and put your case.
Yes, kia ora. I understood I had 10 minutes, but I hear I only have 3, so this is going to be a pretty fast-moving PowerPoint that we've prepared for everyone.
Or just to clarify that, you've actually got 5, so.
5, well,
Yep.
That's a big help. So we've prepared a petition from the residents of the Masonic Woburn Apartments, and it concerns the safety of all users of Waiheke Crescent. If I just flick through to the next one, yes, the area we're talking about is the first part of Waiheke Crescent that comes from Woburn Road round to the stream, which is the bottom right of your screen where the tree line is. That's the most narrow part of the crescent. It then widens out into Ludlam Crescent after that. So we're just talking about this first part from Woburn Road around to the stream. Some of the hazards that exist on Waiheke Crescent include that crossing at the first part between Woburn Road turning into Waiheke Crescent. The first picture shows a couple of residents crossing that road. Now there are islands there, but the hazard that people have discovered is that a number of drivers do U-turns to get from Woburn Road going one direction and to turn around and go back the other. And so if you're trying to cross the road, as someone like George does, and it's not that easy to turn your neck 90 degrees to see that someone's about to swipe you as you step out. And that second picture demonstrates that very fact that I'm talking about. There's a car doing a U-turn. And they also do a U-turn coming in the other direction as well. So often it's when it's congested on Woburn Road and they need to turn around and go another way. The third picture shows another hazard, which is the other part of Waiheke Crescent where parking is on both sides of the road. So in order for any vehicle going in either direction, they have to drive down the middle of the road over the white lines. There's a van showing that. And the fourth picture shows one of our residents who uses an electric wheelchair. There are a number of footpath users along Waiheke Crescent who have walkers or walking sticks or electric wheelchairs. And the multiple driveways along both sides of Waiheke Crescent are hazards, especially at busy times. So the kinds of users we're talking about here include Hutt Valley High School students who park along that early part of Waiheke Crescent. They are, in general, they're inexperienced teenage drivers. And so it's a challenging mix between teenage drivers and elderly residents of the 2 retirement villages that exist there on Waiheke Crescent, let alone the care facility. The bottom picture with the little red car, that's my car, and I have a driveway which does have some challenges around sight lines. That shows a resident of the Crescent negotiating around with a pram around my car. Well, I have to reverse. I can't go the other way and reverse in because it's even more dangerous to turn at the corner there. The other group that are worth remembering are the delivery drivers, the courier drivers, who are always busy around our area, and they often use Waiheke Crescent as a shortcut as well, and they drive fast. The next one here is about attempting to to cross the road. If we are coming from the retirement village, and we want to go across Woburn Road to cross to the Hutt Rec and the CBD, we have to cross Wadey Crescent somewhere. And these two pictures show the two possible places where it is safe to jaywalk because we get reasonable sight lines. The first picture shows the visibility looking towards Woburn Road, and the second one shows the visibility at the curve by the retirement village. We estimate that the vehicle traffic for just the two retirement villages alone, not counting residents using Wadey Crescent, plus the care facility, plus service vehicles and ambulances and rubbish trucks, would be around 180 to 200 vehicles in and out over a couple of days. So it's more traffic than what it appears. It's not just a suburban street. There are these villages that have many vehicles coming and going. It's a busy, quiet street. So here's pictures from the Environ retirement village looking west and looking east. The first one shows an ambulance coming out of the Environ complex. Ambulances, they could be daily vehicles from these three places that are based on Wadey Crescent. The image on the right shows another hazard where the little blue car driving Miss Daisy was pulling out of the Enliven village and turning right. And the car with the trailer, there was a ute with a trailer, just came around the corner, and the driver of Miss Daisy couldn't pick up that there was this driver coming towards her. It was a very near accident, that one. So again, the driver of the ute was driving it, he wasn't going fast, but because of the limited visibility for people exiting these entrances with the two parks on either side of the road, it's quite dangerous at times, unless people slow down.
And Catherine, just let you know that you've just gone a little bit past the 5-minute mark, but I'm happy to extend just a little bit more because we don't get petitions very often.
I've got my last slide. Good. Okay, great. So there is a need for better signage in both directions. We're saying that there are many vehicles that come and go from these three villages, and there are only 2 yellow signs. The side on the left shows that there's a yellow diamond with the arrow to say there is a curve, and then there's another reflective one on the curve. There used to be a sign, I understand, that gave a speed limit, but it no longer exists. And there, the second slide shows, coming from the other direction, the multiple entrances with vehicles coming and going in and out to meet traffic that's going in 2 directions. I just would like to note that these photos that I took were only taken over a 45-minute period. Nothing was set up. It was just a 45-minute period on a morning a few weeks ago. And so you get a sense of all the different hazards that can occur over a day, let alone a week. So I'd just like to say thank you for listening to us. We've got a petition there. I'm assuming you're able to access the petition, seeking for help for the residents of Wadey Crescent. So because we don't have a safe place to cross, we're encouraged to go out and walk and have exercise. And it's not safe to do so when we've got people with disabilities who move slowly. Some people have visual disabilities. It's quite dangerous for us, and speed is a significant factor in that crescent. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and to be admired for having such an active lifestyle. Just a quick question from me before I put it to elected members. Do you have a sort of a ballpark figure? You mentioned 2 villages in Waiiti. The number of residents of both villages? We've got the number of cars. It's very active little street.
The number of residents in the Masonic Retirement Village is 90. Then the care facility has 60 beds.
The number of apartments is 90.
90 apartments.
So it's well over 90.
It's 120.
120 going up. And I can't speak for the other one. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Elected members, any questions? No, you've done an excellent job of presenting your petition, so thank you very much, and safety really to be a primary focus, so,
Yes.
so well done on that.
Thank you.
So I move the motion that the subcommittee notes that the petition on pedestrian safety on Waiiti Crescent, Woburn unfortunately exceeds 150 word limit specified under Council Standing Order 18.1, but we approve the acceptance of the petition attached as Appendix 1 to the report. We extend our thanks to the petitioners and we agree to refer the petition to officers to inform their work in relation to pedestrian safety on Waiiti Crescent, Woburn. So basically that it will be considered and passed on to the Traffic Subcommittee, and will probably come back around in the next November meeting. So thank you very much for that. Do I have a seconder? And Councillor Barrett. I've put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, thank you.
Item number 5, conflict of interest declarations. I call on members to declare any conflicts of interest that they may have in relation to the items on the agenda. Right, we do have a precedence of business in accordance with Standing Order 10.4. I accord precedence of business to item 6I, broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times, Orongorongo Terrace, Wainuiomata. I also under Standing Order 22.16, the Chair of Petone Community Board, Mike Fisher, exercises his right to participate in the discussion in item 6A, Petone paid parking. So, Mike, you're quite welcome to join us at the table and join the discussion. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, you have to wait until the Petone parking issue comes up. It was a nice practice run. Item number 6. Recommendations to... So here we go. Item 6I, broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times, Orongorongo Terrace, Wainuiomata. Can officers step to the table? I invite Paul Hutt, Head of Transport, Evander Schrerer, Traffic Engineering Manager, to speak to the report. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Madam Chair. This report for Orongorongo Terrace seeks the subcommittee's approval for the proposed broken yellow lines, no stopping at all time restrictions outside and opposite number 11 Orongorongo Terrace in Wainuiomata. The intention of these broken yellow lines is to improve safety for road users. A request has been received from Te Puna Wai for the residents regarding vehicle access issues at this location towards the end of Orongorongo Terrace and into Te Puna Wai, located at the end of the road. The road width is narrow, and when vehicles are parked at this location, there is insufficient clearance for large vehicles to access the community facilities. Council's engineers have visited the site and measured the road width at 5 metres wide and subsequently recommend the implementation of the broken yellow lines to alleviate the access issues. Consultation was undertaken between the 4th of July and the 23rd of July 2024, covering a catchment of approximately 100 metres around the site. 20 consultation letters were delivered to residents, 4 responses were received, 3 were in favour and 1 was against. The response against sought the removal of the 5 metres of broken yellow lines outside number 11 and a speed restriction put in place instead. Officers did not recommend this, as the narrowing of the road is coming to a pinch point at this location at the end of the road by the entrance to Te Puna Wai. This paper was presented to the Wainuiomata Community Board and gained the board's support. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Do any members have a question? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. Obviously, the member of the public mentioned that the pinch point, that they thought that the width of the area that we're actually doing is 7.4 metres. rather than the 5. I'm looking at the map that we've been given, and the pinch point to me appears to be outside of the area that we're actually putting the broken yellow lines on. Just wondering if you could further elucidate on the actual distances.
I can confirm that during the site visit, we noticed that there were trucks, large vehicles parked on the site. Normally, large vehicles such as trucks require more space for parking. And for this reason, we have decided to proceed with the proposal of broken yellow lines. With trucks parked on that section of the road, the carriageway would not be suitable for emergency services.
Councillor Mitchell.
There was also a suggestion in public comment that yellow broken lines on one side of the road here would be sufficient to allow for the passage of large vehicles through there. Do officers agree with that?
We partially agree. So we have proposed the broken lines on one side of the road initially, except the 5 meters on the pinch point where the road becomes narrow, which is at the entrance of Te Puna Way.
Councillor Dyer.
Yes, I just want to clarify, the red lines are already there, that's private property, we're not doing anything there. The pinch point there is 5 metres. The place where we're proposing to put the yellow lines is 5 metres there as well?
Where the broken lines were installed in the private property, that's where there are 5 meters carriageway. For vehicles to access the pinch point, they would need more space. If a vehicle would be parked on one side of the road, emergency services would not be able to easily access that 5 meter carriageway.
So what's the actual width where our yellow lines are proposed to be?
That's approximately the 7 meters described by the resident.
Just a question from me, just in regards to the diagram I'm looking at now. So Te Puna Way is access to, how much traffic is driven down that street to access that particular area?
We do not have that information. The information received by Te Puna Way is that their development requires multiple access to it, and for this reason, in case of emergency, they seem to have issues related to accessibility.
And it's noted that the Wainuiomata Community Board endorsed the recommendation as well. Are there any further questions? Councillor Dyer?
So if we were only to do yellow lines on the inside of the corner, as was suggested in public comment, that would have no impact on the actual pinch point where the private yellow lines are?
Where the private access is located is where the road is 5 meters. What could happen is, in case of emergency, emergency services would potentially need to access that narrow section of the road through the footpath. That is a possibility, and that could happen with the removal of the broken lines of the 5 meters outside of property number 11.
Are there any other questions? Right. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I was a bit confused when I first saw this about the longer section of yellow lines on one side and the 5 meters on the other side. That stretch of road there looks to be, and it's just a satellite image, looks to be the same width the whole way down. So I didn't really understand how there could be a problem with part of it and the same problem not exist for all of it. And my initial thought was, why aren't the yellow lines going all the way down to what looks like a tiled section? I'm not sure what the stripes are. Yeah, and I guess I can't really see when you get to the 7 meter width where we are proposing to put 5 meter broken yellow lines, how a single vehicle there is still blocking access into the narrow part of the road. double, sure, but single, if there was something parked there, an emergency vehicle could get around it by the look of things.
Thank you. We should be able to contact emergency services to seek for their advice on it.
Yeah, I think that would be really good, actually. And the request hasn't come from emergency services themselves, but to have their advice on it might just reassure the residents of the other section.
So is there a minimum standard required for emergency vehicles passage through any of their streets?
That is, according to emergency management, they would require a 2.5 minimum traffic clearance. However, if there is a vehicle parked on one side of the road or on the other side, normally these vehicles would need 2.1 space on each side of the road for parking.
Are there any other questions, Councillor Parkin?
So just to confirm that if we put in broken yellow lines on one side of the road only, it would still meet the standard?
It would meet the standard. However, emergency services may have some difficulties to access. They should be able to access the site in case of emergency by accessing, driving over the footpath where we have the 5-meter space.
Why would they need to drive? It's a 7-meter road. If there was one car parked there, they would still probably leave 4.5 meters of space for it.
Yeah, I'm referring to the point where emergency services would access the pinch point of the 5 meters.
We have no control over that pinch point, and those yellow lines are already done, so it's not really being considered today.
Are there any other questions? Paul, do you have anything to add to this paper?
No, Madam Chair, nothing further to add.
Thank you. I move the motion that the subcommittee recommends that council receives and notes the information, approves the installation of broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times parking restriction outside and opposite 11 Orongaronga Terrace, Wainuiomata, attached as Appendix 1 to the report, rescinds any previous resolutions pertaining to traffic controls made pursuant to any bylaw to the extent that they conflict with the traffic controls described in the report, and notes that these parking restrictions will take effect once the appropriate road markings have been installed. Do I have a seconder? It doesn't appear we have a seconder. Councillor Parkin.
I'd like to propose the motion that we amend the recommendation to remove the added additional proposed broken yellow lines on the upper side of the image and put in the 32.1 metres of broken yellow lines on the lower side of the image.
Is there any comment for any other members? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I think that's quite simply removing the words "and opposite" from recommendation 2. But I would like to hear what emergency services think about whether the other 5 metres is required. So in addition, we could just approve the one side. Sorry, it's not "and opposite," removing the words outside and. I would like to seek the emergency services view on whether that would be sufficient for them or whether they would request additional yellow line, the additional 5 metres of yellow lines. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, just to clarify, I did get that the wrong way around. In option 2, if we remove the words outside and, so we approve the lines opposite 11 Orongaronga Terrace, and then seek the view of emergency services whether they would like the additional 5 metres to allow their access. They might well come back and say they do, or they might come back and say it's unnecessary.
I think that makes good sense. Can we put the new wording recommendations up on the screen, please, to have a look at?
Sorry, I misspoke. The first one, yeah. Opposite is correct.
Councillor Mitchell, the rest of your wording for emergency services said
As to whether they would also like yellow lines outside 11 Orongorongo Terrace. Just broken yellow lines outside 11 Orongorongo Terrace.
Does that read okay? Thank you. Right, I now move the motion that the subcommittee recommends that council receives the notes information for the amended recommendation, improves the installation of broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times, parking restriction opposite 11 Orongorongo Terrace, Wainuiomata, attached as Appendix 1 to the report, and seek advice from emergency services as to whether they would like broken yellow lines outside 11 Orongorongo Terrace, Wainuiomata. And then Part 3 rescinds any previous resolutions pertaining to traffic controls made pursuant to any bylaw to the extent that they conflict with the traffic controls described in the report, and notes that these parking restrictions will take place once the appropriate road markings have been installed. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Parkin. I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against, say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much. I'd like to now invite Petone Community Board Chair Mike Fisher to the table for the next part of the agenda. 6A, recommendations to Te Kanohiri o Te Awakairangi Council on the 1st of October 2024. 6A, proposed paid parking in Petone, page 19 of the agenda. And we have at the table Paul Hewitt and Evandro Shura. If you'd like to speak to the report, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Madam Chair. This report seeks the subcommittee's approval for the formal resolution of paid parking in Petone, specifically Jackson Street between High Street and Cuba Street, and the Peel Street car park. This is to resolute the necessary changes following Council's adoption of the long-term plan earlier this year. Council's long-term plan approved the conversion of existing car parks, excluding loading zones, within these locations to P120 paid parking between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday to Sunday, excluding public holidays. This resolution does not include the P30, P10 and on-street parking around the library at Britannia Street. Consultation for the introduction of paid parking in Petone was undertaken as part of the long-term plan consultation. This included meetings with businesses on Jackson Street and Council receiving written and verbal submissions on the matter for their consideration. Council considered and debated several paid parking timing configurations through the long-term annual plan subcommittee and recommended P120 paid parking for the hours 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days per week for inclusion in the approved long-term plan. There is no proposed changes to the locations of existing loading zones or mobility parks in these locations. Advertising of the changes will be undertaken during September. This will include advertising in the Hutt News, the Eastbourne Herald, use of social media platforms and the Council's website. A report was presented to the Petone Community Board, who supported amending the existing mobility parking to at all times, but otherwise reiterated the board's opposition to the introduction of paid parking in Petone. I would add a wider review of parking in Petone is planned for the first half of 2025, which will be wider than the areas we're looking at. I I've also just been forwarded a couple of questions earlier today via Councillor Brady Dyer from Jackson Street programme, who have 3 questions I would just take the opportunity to address.
Please
now,
do.
if I may. There was a question regarding, or comment regarding the loss of a disability car park between Britannia Street and Cuba Street, when there is no intention to change the layout of the existing parking in terms of mobility parks and loading zones through this report. We will just be looking at the existing parking and the introduction of paid parking to those parks. There's also the request around a disability car park turning left onto Jackson Street. At this point, we propose to leave that car park where it is and take a wider view when we do our review in the first half of next year of the location of car parks and make appropriate changes at that point in time. Similarly, on point 3, it is raised that between Britannia Street and Cuba Street, there are no loading bays. At a lot of the intersections of other streets with Jackson Street, there is time-limited parking. I think at most of the side streets there is time-limited parking, P10 to P30, at these intersections which can be used. And we will take into consideration the any additional loading zones required on Jackson Street through the review next year, where we can take a good view on business needs and appropriate locations for anything at that time. Thank you.
Thanks for that detail, Paul. Members, do we have any questions? I'm sure we do. Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, thank you for the report, Paul. First question is regarding mobility parks. Council have a policy for parking that is 60 minutes or shorter, that you can take 1 hour and 20 if you're using a mobility park. But for a mobility park that is set for 2 hours, it is the time that as stated on the sign, there is no extension. Would there be anything stopping us from changing the mobility parks to P180, i.e. 3 hours, and being able to recognise the needs of the community from that?
We have included the mobility parks as P120 for consistency through the required changes here. But if the subcommittee wished to make a recommendation that mobility parks were increased to P180, that could be taken forward and we could make those changes.
Just a question from me on that. Would that set precedence for all other mobility parks in the city?
We'll have to do a bit of work around the zoning and how it works, configures with the machines at this point in time, because the machines used would be consistent through the HC2 zone to P120. It wouldn't create a precedent as it would be signposted for these zones, and they'll be taken on their own merit.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question on that too, which was whether it introduces a technical difficulty with paying for parking to have parks with different limits, or is it just simply what the signs say?
It does create a difficulty that will have to be investigated to an action with is pay by plate, and that wouldn't recognise the difference between mobility parks and non-mobility parks.
Councillor Parkin.
Just to follow up on that one, do we not already have that problem? Because our policy means that you have an extra period of time free, be it double, I think it's roughly double, until you get to 2 hours.
I'd have to look into that. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Mitchell.
I just had a couple of questions about provision of parking at other libraries, and I don't know if you'll have the answers at hand, but one was about paid parking at libraries. I think all libraries, as far as I know, our other libraries have unpaid parks available nearby. And I was just curious about the number. There's kind of, I think it was 8 retained here for Petone Library, how that compares to, say, the War Memorial Library over here, where anywhere outside of that car park, you would be paying to park on the street, but in that particular car park, how many spaces are available for War Memorial Library users?
The intention with the PO car park is to retain the parking spaces for council staff. With regards to our proposal of implementing the paid parking, we see that to be a potential mitigation plan as most drivers who would need to park for a long period of times would seek for alternative parking, and they would see as an opportunity for parking on the PO car park. With the implementation of the paid parking on the PO car park, we may be able to mitigate that issue and avoid any potential congestions in the PO car park facility.
My question is about provision of free parking outside libraries, and the paper here mentions it is eight P30s that will be retained. They're not in the Peel car park, they're on the other side of the library, which I assume are being retained for library users. I just wondered how that compared with the provision of free parking at other libraries in terms of the number of parks which are free and available to library users.
I understand, Councillor, that other libraries don't have paid parking.
Okay. The other question I had, because it was mentioned in the public comment, was again about other libraries and the duration outside other libraries. I know my library well at Nainai, and the longest parks near that library are P120s, the same as what's proposed here, but is that common to our libraries? Do you know?
For the PO car park in Petone, we see that to be a particular case mostly associated with the paid parking in Petone.
So you don't see them as being library car parks, but there was a point raised about some Petone library users wanting longer than P120s, and some Nainai users might like longer than P120s too. Again, I was just asking at the provision at other libraries. Wainui Library, I'm pretty sure Queen Street is P120, Nainai is P120. Is that common to our libraries, that, you know, that shorter time frame is kind of typical to what's out in front of a library?
Yes, it's reasonably common.
Any other questions, selected members? Mike.
Yeah, I'd just follow up those questions I raised at the public comment section about the ring fencing of the potential revenue was one, and the other is a comment, just a quick count of the parks in Peel Place. There's potentially 14, including 2 mobility parks that would meet the requirements of that free parking, and also closest to the library for mobility users and potential people using the lab, etc., that could be made free. And I understand, and this is not scientific, I asked very quickly, I believe there's at least 20 car parks that would be free at War Memorial Library by comparison.
On the revenue, our calculations were the revenue from annual revenue from paid parking in Petone was going to be around the 890,000 per annum. And with respect to the comments on Peel Street, I think there are approximately 50 car parks available in there, and at the moment, see, our proposal is following from the decisions in the long-term plan, annual plan, that the parking is P120 paid. But should the subcommittee wish to make any changes to that, allow a number of parks to be made unpaid for a duration, we could enact that if the subcommittee made that recommendation.
I notice that John Kingsley's on the screen. If you'd like to give us some input, please, John.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, councillors. So I'm sorry I can't be with you in person. So in response to the ring fencing, we're still waiting for final funding from Waka Kotahi for the 3-year NLTP period. So we're not in any position to assess whether that is actually viable, because we don't know how much funding, particularly for maintenance renewals, we're going to get. So we may have to do some further work around levels of service across the whole city. So until we have that information, and then that's coming back to a Paul can probably talk to I think it's November meeting of infrastructure and regulatory. We can't really lock in any work or any programs on that respect.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just with regard to the point that was raised about maybe carving out, and you said it could be done, and I certainly don't think it's the place of this subcommittee to override the long-term plan committees, but it is a discussion we could have again. But I was curious, because it was mentioned in our long-term plan discussions, people's concerns about whether there was adequate free parking for the library. What consideration, if any, has been given to that by officers, and how did they come to the conclusion that 8 was adequate, if it was considered at all? And sorry, I realise this kind of cuts across various committees, and that you guys are here for the approval of changing the signs and things, but John's on the call as well. So has there been consideration of providing additional free parking in Peel Street, in the Peel car park? And if so, why was the conclusion reached that's before us today?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Councillor. So yes, the team did actually assess that. The calculations that the savings / revenue that went into the long-term plan were made on a certain number of car parks. So if we were to reduce from, I think it's 8 in there in the paper, then there'd need to be some recalculation. So that was just in order to keep a certain number of longer parks for people for that library usage. So there hasn't been any other work done around any greater numbers. There was a number that was just identified as potentially an option. So should members want us to go back and have a look at further, then that would involve more recalculations and going back through the annual plan.
Just in regards to some of the recommendations, we have been playing around a little bit with some of the recommendations here. But before we go to that, does anybody else have any other questions? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, my questions are around the 4-hour limit changing to 2. What would be the change if we were to go with 2 hours when we're charging people to be there? That's the disincentive to move on when you've done your shopping, etc. Why do we need to reduce that limit from 4 down to 2? I can just see it having so many unintended consequences with hairdressers and Lighthouse Cinema and people that are spending the whole afternoon there. As Kaz sort of said, like the paid parking is one thing, but the time limit's another thing as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think there's a couple of issues there. We want consistency around the 120, and as we roll out more wider parking policy work and assess the different areas, P120 is likely to be where we'll land. So everyone knows the time frame regardless of where they go. In respect of the cinema and stuff, there's plenty of on-street parking that is free around that area. We were specifically really looking at this as the library and then that immediate area. So that's why we've done that.
Any final questions? Okay. Following feedback received, I propose that we move items 1 to 10 with an amendment, 2 amendments, 1 to 3E in regards to mobility paid parking spaces, changing from 2 times P120 to 2 times P180. And item number 4, adding with the exception of 6 times P120 time limited parking spaces. We'll put this up on the screen. Are there any comments before I move this motion?
Sorry, are you suggesting in Peel Street retaining 6 free car parks?
Correct. Is the wording sufficient?
It is, but I feel uneasy considering this at this committee. I feel like this needs to go to council. Our long-term plan, annual plan has been signed off by council considering these car parks to be the revenue that was assumed through the plan. This might have some unintended consequences. We could ask, obviously this has got to go to full council for sign off. We could ask officers to consider what the impact would be on retaining some car parks. Like off the top of my head, I probably wouldn't support having 6 2-hour car parks for free, maybe a few more P30s or P60s, but not 2 hours. They'll be the hottest car parks in town. But I don't think that's something that we can do right now here. So maybe we just ask officers to consider, which back to Councillor Mitchell's point, I thought we kind of made that point at the committee LTP when we signed it off, that this was an area that we did want to see a bit more work explored with and have a bit more feedback onto what we could do with Peel Street. And it doesn't really seem like anything's really been done.
I did notice John there for a moment, wishing to make comment. Has he gone?
No, Madam Chair, no, I'm here. So fair comment from Councillor Dyer. So, but I think 6 wasn't going to make an impact, from my understanding, on the numbers. But anything greater than that, I do stand to be corrected on that. But this would still go, even after today, it still goes to council for final call. Final call anyway. So
I propose that we Councillor Mitchell.
I'll comment on both of those amendments, actually. Firstly, just the one at hand. I think perhaps instead of proposing a change today, we could ask for options for providing additional free parking for Petone Library users to be brought to the full council meeting alongside this recommendation. As I said, I really don't feel it's the place of this subcommittee, which is a small group of council, to be overriding decisions from the LTP committee. However, there was a request for this to be looked at, so if it could be looked at and some information could be brought, including revenue impacts or any other considerations, number of free car parks at our other libraries, for example, for that information to be brought to the full council, and we can discuss it as a whole group then. And then my other comment is with regards to the P180, and there are other papers in front of us today which also deal with mobility parks outside council facilities where the time limit is and always has been P120, and I feel like we're dealing with this in isolation instead of as a policy issue, and it may well be a policy issue if it's written into policy. So my personal view is that those parks at the library probably for now should be treated as the same as the parks outside the Dowse. And if there's a policy issue that needs to be looked at, it should be looked at as a whole across all of those parks across the city.
Good point. Before we bring this up again for another look, Councillor Parker.
Yeah, I'd just like to indicate that I would be happy that we actually look at this as a wider issue for disability or mobility parks, and that whether or not we actually need a greater time frame for them in general, and whether or not our policy is actually acting as intended and meeting the needs of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Have you got something to add?
yeah, sorry, I can't find the hand signal through Zoom. Sorry. Yeah, so completely agree. That consistency is something that we definitely look at. So very happy with the recommendation. I will just note the timing of implementation of paid parking in Petone is 1st of October. So we don't have a lot of time. So so officers can do some work between now and the council meeting, but just noting that that implementation date is only just over a month away.
Thank you, John. If we can just take a recess for 5 minutes while we... Oh, are there any more comment before we do that?
Yeah, sorry, I did have a quick comment, something for officers to consider in the recess before we started discussing any of this. The first kind of half a dozen recommendations here all specifically talk about P120 paid parking spaces. Recommendations F, G and H just say paid parking spaces. They don't have any reference to times on there, so I just wondered if that needed to be included in those resolutions. Just something to have a look at in the recess.
Sorry, Councillor Mitchell? 5 minutes recess while we work through this. Thank you. live streaming's back on, so following our short recess, we've reset the recommendations as they are on the screen. If you'd like to read where the changes have been made in red, we've got some small changes there just to reflect the language that is used in these recommendations around number F, 38 times P20 paid parking spaces, and so on for G and H. And then we've added item number 11 to ask officers to present information about options for additional free parking for Petone Library visitors. And this will go to the full council on the 1st of October for a decision. So accordingly, I ask that the subcommittee recommends that we move items 1 to 11. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Is there any debate? Councillor Parkin, thank you.
Kia ora, Chair. Not debate, but, well, no, I will do both. I'd like to thank the committee for listening to the community. I don't think we've quite got there yet, but we're certainly on the progress. But I do want to note that I have an interest in this, particularly with the disability parks, because I have a disability myself. And I'm sorry I forgot to mention it during the conflict of interest. I don't think it hits the level of conflict, but I do want the interest noted.
Appreciate that, Councillor Parkin. Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
Following on from Councillor Parkin, I should say that I actually work for the disability sector as well, and I don't think it meets the conflict of interest, but I will declare it.
Thank you. So I've put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. One further comment, a late hand up here from Councillor Dyer.
Sorry, yeah, happy to support these recommendations, but just noting that we do need to make a decision at that full council meeting for the reasons that John said with being up against the deadline for 1 October. I'm hopeful officers can provide some pretty solid reasoning why Peel Street has to change to 2 hours. It's currently 4, some places on the street are 60, some are 2 hours, some are 10, some are 30, and it works. So I don't see why changing it to paid parking is all of a sudden going to make it not possible to keep Peel Street at 4 hours. It's its own designated enclosed car park. So I'm hopeful we can see if we can retain it, because I feel like that will be a double blow for the people that park there now. Not only going to turn up and go, oh, I've got to pay now. They're going to go, oh, I can't even pay you to park here to go to the cinema. I'm going to have to go find a park down the street, and then we don't get their money anyway.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Mitchell.
Sorry, just in light of my colleagues' comments, that is not information that has been requested today from the resolution about additional free paid parking. And if you want that information to come to the same meeting, I maybe suggest an additional recommendation requesting exactly what you want to hear. Yeah,
let's add one. I was trying to keep it tidy because if we could add an additional recommendation, to explore the option of retaining Peel Street at 4-hour limit. Paid. Yes, definitely paid. Like in my mind, it would be additional money if more people were parking there for longer than trying to turn people over more. And I think it's going to have some really unintended consequences by cutting it.
Councillor Dyer, can you come and have a look at the recommendations? Okay, so we will put these amendments back up on the screen, please. Have a look. The addition there being item number 11, asks officers to present information about options for additional free parking for Petone Library visitors, and Part 12, to explore the option of retaining Peel Street car park at P240 time limit, paid parking, and I repeat that this will go to the full council meeting of the 1st of October 24, and as Councillor Dyer has already mentioned, timing is everything on this. So, do we have a seconder? I'll better move it from the beginning, move items 1 to 12. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Is there any debate, further debate? Okay, those in favour, please say aye. Those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, for your time at the table. Moving on to Part B, proposed time-limited parking 7A and 6 Britannia Street, Petone. Page 27 at the agenda, Officers already at the table. So thank you, Mike, for your time. Appreciate that. So do you have anything to add to the paper on 7A and 6 Britannia Street, Petone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This resolution is just for the introduction of a P10 time-limited car park outside 7A Britannia Street in Petone, and to formalise the enforcement hours of one existing mobility park outside number 6 Britannia Street to be at all times. A request was received from Council's parking team to consider ways to reduce illegal parking outside number 7A Britannia Street, which is the location of a New Zealand Post mailbox, which currently has broken yellow lines leading to people parking illegally to access the mailbox. Council engineers have assessed the site and proposed the installation of a P10 time-limited parking space to enable legal parking when accessing the post box. And obviously they identified the mobility park at that time and recommend that to be extended to at all times. Consultation took place between the 4th and the 23rd of July and covered the catchment of 100 metres around the proposed site. 31 letters were delivered to residents and businesses. No responses were received. Thank you.
And noted that the Petone Community Board have endorsed this. Does any members have a question? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. What's the time limit for the mobility access?
That's the standard hours, so that will be for a P120.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just curious, the addition of at all times, what's the current state of it without those words there? Does it expire at 6 o'clock?
That's correct. It's only enforceable until 6 o'clock. Then it's unrestricted.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, just looking at our mobility parking, which I've still got up from the previous paper, it says if it's a mobility car park, then it needs to have the duration on the sign. So can we add the addition of P120 to that?
Yes, we can add that when we'll be implementing the sign to implement a label on top of the existing sign.
Thank you. That will address that. Any more questions? No. So I move the motion that the subcommittee recommends that council approves items 1 to 5. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parkin. Is there any debate? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I love the idea of tidying up the at all times the mobility car parks. I've had a few residents raise this issue with me in some places outside restaurants and places where people do frequent outside of business hours. Effectively, if it doesn't have at all times, it means anyone can park there after hours, and when it's outside a restaurant or a gym where people are going, it does catch them up. So I'd be quite keen to actually see a report that comes to this committee that just says, let's just blanket every single disability car park in the whole city at all times. I can't see any reason why you wouldn't want to do that. It's great that we can tidy it up, this particular one now, but yeah, just something to consider for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer, and good comment. I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against, say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Item C, proposed time-limited parking High Street on Bulcott, page 34 of the agenda. We have the officers at the table if you'd like to speak to the paper, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This resolution is for High Street Bulcott for the introduction of one P10 at all times parking space outside number 667 High Street, 4 unrestricted parking spaces outside 659 High Street, which is the mobile service station, and 2 P30 at all times parking spaces outside 638 High Street. As many of the members will be aware, this intersection is currently being upgraded to a signalised raised platform intersection, which includes the signalised pedestrian crossings at this location. This has been upgraded as a result of increased traffic in the area. Council has been approached by the business owners to consider changes that would promote increased turnover to benefit both the customers and their businesses. The council engineers have considered the requirements of the area, and including the businesses, residents and the hospital across the road, and the proposed parking configuration in Appendix 1 on page 38 is the recommended balance for these competing needs. Consultation took place between the 2nd and the 23rd of July, covering the catchment area of around 100 metres around the proposed site. 12 consultation letters were delivered to the residents and businesses. 2 responses were received, one in support of the proposed changes and one was neutral. The response in support was the one that requested additional parking outside the mobile service station. That is currently broken yellow lines, no parking. Officers believed that it was a good decision and to convert it to the 4 unrestricted car parks that are proposed. The neutral response sought P5 and P15 time-limited car parks instead of what is proposed outside 667 High Street. Through enforcement and business needs and turnover, officers recommended the P10 and P30. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and I'm pleased that we're considering the needs of the local shops in that particular area. Does any member have a question? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, it's great we've been able to accommodate the submissions to reinstate these 1 to 4 car parks outside mobile. Just wondering, have we gone back to mobile since, just to make sure they are happy with these 4 car parks?
Thanks for the question. We have been in touch with them.
Are there any other questions? I move the motion that subcommittee recommends that council accepts items 1 to 4. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barrett, thank you. Is there any debate? Put the motion, going back to Councillor Barrett, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I can say I'm really happy that this is going ahead. I've had lots of residents who have called me about this intersection and what is happening around there with the low visibility and, you know, words used like it's an accident waiting to happen around this area. Also, the business owners are really happy that they're being listened to, that there is need for this to happen. So thank you.
Thank you for the feedback, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I now put the motion, which is being moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item D, proposed time-limited parking, 79 Marston Street, Malin, outside the Little Footprints Childcare Centre on page 42 of the agenda. The officers are already at the table. Do you have anything to say on the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This resolution seeks the subcommittee's support for the installation of 6 P10 time-limited parking spaces operating 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on outside 79 Marsden Street, the Little Footprints Daycare Centre. Council received a request from Little Footprints Childcare Centre for the limited parking to improve the ability of the drop-off pickup at their centre. Current parking around the centre is unrestricted and is heavily used by local businesses, and going forward with the Riverlink project as well, it's envisaged construction parking will be in the area as well. Council engineers assessed the location and initially recommended 2 P10 parking spaces, but following consultation, it was recommended that 6 P10 spaces are installed, as shown in Appendix 1 on page 45. The operating hours will be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Throughout that period, as drop-off and pick-up is inconsistent. Consultation took place between the 2nd and 23rd of July 2024, covering a catchment area around 100 metres from the daycare. 19 consultation letters were delivered to residents. 4 responses were received. All responses requested the number of spaces be increased from 2 to 6. Thank you.
Thank you for this paper too. It also makes good sense for the safety of the children involved. Does any members have a question? A well-written report, obviously. I move the motion that subcommittee recommends that council and that we move items number 1 to 4. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Parkin. Is there any debate? Moving through, I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against, say no. I declare the motion is carried. Now on to item E, proposed parking configuration, Wainuiomata High School, on page 49 of the agenda. If you'd like to speak to the paper, please, officers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report seeks the approval for the subcommittee for a new parking configuration that is aligned to the construction and redevelopment works being undertaken at Wainuiomata High School. The new parking configuration is shown in Appendix 1 and includes 8 P10 parking spaces outside 60 Parkway, changes to the existing P5 parking between 71 and 77 Parkway, converting them to P10, and the broken yellow lines and bus stop outside 65 to 69 Parkway. The P10 car parks are proposed to operate between 8:15 a.m, 9:15 a.m, and 2:45 to 3:45 during school days. The construction for the redevelopment is scheduled to start in September, October of this year. Council was approached by the planners of the school development where concerns were raised around the parking issues at the start and end of the school day. To mitigate this, the introduction of the additional P10 parks is proposed, and that is in addition to converting the existing P5 car parks to P10, which will enable them to be enforced. Consultation took place between the 12th and 26th of July, which covered a catchment area around 100 metres around the school. The school also distributed the consultation letter to staff and parents. Of the letters, the 37 consultation letters that were delivered to residents and businesses, 1 response was received, which was unrelated to the proposal. This paper was supported by the Wainuiomata Community Board at its meeting on the 14th of August, although the board did raise concerns about the ability of the bus stop to be used outside the school drop-off and pick-up times. The process to enable this to happen has been clarified with both the Wainuiomata Community Board and the high school, and they're happy with the proposal process to enable the bus stop to be used outside of those hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Just seeking clarification before I ask members. Recommendations, part 2 approves the implementation of, on the paper it says 7 and you actually said 8. Which would be the correct one?
Thanks for that. It's 7 as per recommendation number 2. We also noticed that under recommendation 3, there's no statement of the number of parking spaces to be converted. The number is 8.
Thank you for that. We'll just make the changes on the recommendations. Members, are there any questions? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. You mentioned that the P5 was not enforceable. Could you elucidate on that?
The time period that the enforcement team normally use over and above a period for enforcement tickets to be issued is 6 minutes, and the 5 minutes falls to a shorter period than that. So P10 is the preferred option to make any car parks, or a minimum of P10 is the preferred option to make any car parking enforceable.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, my question is about the bus stop. There's obviously a Metlink bus stop 50 metres down the road. A school bus is not able to use that bus stop.
As discussed with the planning team, there is a need for more space for buses. Ideally, they would need 2 buses to be picking up and dropping off passengers. Additionally, we didn't want to create any conflict with the Metlink bus stop. Therefore, we are proposing a new bus stop to be utilized only during school pickup and drop-off hours.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, and just on bus stops, you mentioned there is a process for the school to use this bus stop outside of the indicated hours there. What's that process? Does it require any signage or anything like that?
Once the traffic resolution will be approved, the sign will be installed as per recommendations. However, outside of after 9:15 a.m. and until 2:55 p.m., anyone else can park on the space.
Yeah, so then a bus can't use it if there's someone else parked there. I thought that was the issue that they had raised.
Sorry, just to clarify, if the school wishes, as an event or whatever, that requires the bus stop to be used, the process will involve the school just contacting the enforcement team. They've got the details to give the enforcement team notice of when they're going to be using it. There'll be the ability for them to then put some cones out, no parking cones along there, and they'll also contact the engineering team just to say for that period they'll be using the bus stop.
Any other questions? Okay, so propose we move items 1 to 8 with an amendment of part 3, an addition, not amendment, to the sentence there. Existing P5 parking spaces 8 times P10. So moving items number 1 to 8. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Is there any debate? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just a quick thanks to the officers for working with the school on these solutions here. I think we can all agree that around schools at particular times of day are a real pinch point for not just for parking, but for traffic and pedestrians, and we heard it in public comment today. So this looks like a really good outcome for the school and for the school's students and whānau, so thank you.
I'd reiterate that. Great work there. I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against, please say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Moving to item F, proposed parking changes, 9i Pool, Everest Ave, 9i, page 56 of the agenda. And I'd like to invite Andrew Quinn, the project manager from 9i, to speak to the report. And Paul Hewitt and Evandro will also be available to answer questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report seeks the approval of the subcommittee for the proposed new parking layout of 9i Pool and Fitness Centre in 9i. The new pool complex sits on a different footprint to the previous pool, which necessitates changes to the parking layout around the pool. The proposed new layout is shown on Appendix 1 on page 61 and includes totals of 21 P120 car parks, 2 of which are designated for parents, 4 mobility parks designated at all times, 4 P120 EV sites, 2 P10 car parks and 6 council staff reserved parking. There's also locations of broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times. This proposal does not include any changes to the parking configuration on Everest Avenue outside the shops on the opposite side of the road to the new complex. The old 9i Pool attracted around 450,000 visitors annually, and parking around the pool at the time met the demand for parking spaces within the surrounding town centre. The mix of proposed parking is anticipated to meet the needs of local businesses and the pool complex. An integrated traffic assessment was completed as part of the resource consent application, which was peer reviewed prior to the consent being granted in 2022. The parking layout has been driven by the needs of the parking assessment, and there is an overall net increase in parking available to be used. The initial consultation was carried out in March 2023 with not much feedback received. Further comprehensive consultation was completed via a Have Your Say survey in July 2024. Survey feedback was generally mixed, with the strongest feedback being around the perceived lack of parking within the immediate vicinity of the new complex. It is just important to note that there is in excess of 250 parks in Nainai within a 5-minute walk of the pool. A query was raised around the location of the EV parks, and they are positioned where they are to minimise the distance from the nearest transformer to supply power to them. I'll just note in paragraph 11 there is an error, and the paragraph should reference 2 P10 car parks on Everest Avenue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Andrew, do you have any comment?
No, not at this stage, but happy to take any questions other elected members would have.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is just a question of clarity and may seem a bit pedantic, because although I do agree with this report, and I do hope that everything in here pertains to what should happen to Nainai, because I'm a Nainai resident. I'm just at a loss as to what you class as, under background point 4, where you say the increase of visitors to the area is anticipated to have a positive impact on local businesses, particularly cafes and restaurants. Now, the cafes I know all about. What are you classing as a restaurant? Is that the A1 Roast and the, I think it's called Town and Country next door to it? Is that what you are relating this to? That there will be an extra amount? Have we got extra restaurants happening in Nainai that I know nothing about?
Nainai Hotel.
Oh, Nainai Pub. I've got Nainai Pub written down here. Yeah.
I'll take that question, and yes, you are correct. That I think that's the reference to restaurants as opposed to takeaway food. Restaurants being a place that you can sit down and enjoy your dinner and your kai instead of taking it away.
Before I put it out to other members, I'd just like to build on that question from Councillor Barrett. Has there been some consideration on the impact on those businesses on Everest Ave when nothing's changed around the time limit, but they're going to be competing for pool car parks or people parking at the pool? So is that a consideration for a later review?
For sure, definitely a consideration. When talking to shop owners along Everest Ave, there's not a consistent view on how well used those P120s are going to be. One thing's for sure, as soon as we open the pool, the dynamics along Everest Ave will change dramatically and won't necessarily go back to 2019 in the position that it existed before the pool was closed. Since then, we've had COVID, we've had a number of shops and premises and businesses that have changed, some new, some old. New people have come into the area and some have left. So the dynamics have changed. One thing we are sure of in our research is the numbers of people that come to see and visit the pool will be as great, if not greater, than existed before. So we do have a change in dynamic up there. And as I say, at the moment, there isn't a consistent view as to how well used those P120s are, from the pharmacy at one end to Town and Country to some of the other places. And I talk to those businesses all the day, most days, trade school, kitchen, etc., etc. So, yeah, there is a consideration of how those are going to be used. We do have some time before the pool is open, and possibly a hui with all of Hillary Court residents and businesses might be in order, so that we can consider how they feel and what they think about the changing circumstances.
Thank you for that view of there. Any members, any questions, please? Councillor Barkin.
Kia ora. So first of all, I'd like to note that I drive an electric vehicle, so I have an interest in this one. But at the same time, the comments that I'm going to make are actually for people who don't have electric vehicles, and I do understand the comments from the community that at the moment we do not have a huge number of users of electric vehicles. We are planning and forward planning that is going to change, and we can see that changing already. But my question is, can we make these charging spaces available for people who drive ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, until the time where we actually come across the point that we actually need them, and we're seeing that the other vehicles, the EV vehicle spaces, are being regularly used? I would also note that my understanding, and I just wanted this confirmed, that my understanding is these are electric vehicle charging spaces for EVs that are charging, and if they are not charging, the electric vehicle is not allowed to be there, which actually further exacerbates the point that we wouldn't actually be, that people would not be using the park.
So to take the first question, which is in terms of EV chargers, could they be made occasional, i.e. for EV parkers when using it to charge their car, but then could they be used by internal combustion engines at other time? That's more of a technical point, and maybe I'll refer to my colleagues here in transport to take that one. But in terms of the type of charger that we're using, it's a Meridian supply. So this is a commercial deal with Meridian. The chargers, as I understand, in other areas around the Hutt Valley differ. Two types, both on the same pole. So one charging station will supply 2 car parks. Generally, the encouragement is to charge your car and then move away. They're, I think, P120 until your car is charged. Some are different. Some allow you up to P120 even if your car is charged. Some encourage you to move on as soon as your car has reached its charge. But as to the technical question about when we generally line mark an EV park for other users, I'll refer to my colleagues there.
Thank you. My understanding is that if EV vehicle charging stations are exclusively for the use of drivers who need to charge their EV vehicle, we would need to seek further advice from the parking officers team. However, yeah, that's information is something that we are unable to provide you at this stage.
Just on that, elected members would have to consider the precedence this might set for other EV parking in the region, which is exclusive to electric vehicles.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you guys aren't going to have the answer. I put through an elected members request a thing about usage of EV chargers like this. That there are, I think this was the kind of most contentious part in terms of public feedback, was the provision of 4 EV chargers, and a lot of comments about how many people would actually use them to charge while visiting the pool. And, you know, I think that's a valid concern, and I also think that the worst possible outcome is that those 4 parks sit empty for most of the day while everyone else is driving around looking for car parks. So I did put through a request for information about other charges such as this outside council venues. We rolled out a bunch in the last few years at Koronui Hub, for example. Fraser Park Sportsville, what the usage was, and I got back, I didn't ask the question specifically enough, so total amount of kilowatts that have been put into cars, but I was more interested in the percentage of time they sit in use, because I really think there's a risk here that they will sit there empty, some of the closest parks to the pool. People will be driving around getting angry about it, or they'll just park in those parks anyway, which kind of defeats the purpose. So I think it'd be good to see that information, and I know you probably don't have it at hand today. Again, when this comes through to the full council, perhaps we could have a bit more detail about that. And even the idea of, as you said, they service 2 parks, maybe putting 1 charger, 2 parks in now, and introduce any other ones when there's a demonstrated demand might be a safer way of going about it for us, reputation-wise, and just to see what the use is. But yeah, it'd be good to see some stats around it.
Can I answer that before, Paul, before you start? We've just received an email from Jorn, who's listening in, and he has exactly that data that you request, and it will be sent in by email out to everybody.
Thanks, Norm. Thank you for tuning in and answering that question. But yeah, I'd be really interested to see it because I think there is a bit of a risk there. It is kind of prime real estate for the parking as well. And other people suggested there could be more family parks or another mobility park, and they're all right, of course. But yeah, so I think we need to be careful about how we allocate that space.
Andrew?
Taking the installation of those 2 EV chargers, that's currently the deal with Meridian, that they supply 2 charging stations that supply 4 car parks. It is entirely at our choice. That's not a free issue model. That's a paid and a discounted offer. So if we decided to go for 1 charging station and 2 EV parks and change the other 2 to, let's say, open P120, or for family users, we could consider something like that. Obviously, at some point in time, given that we've got the infrastructure in place and the popularity of those EV parks come back in, we then have to do a reinstall, and there is a associated cost with doing a 2-stage installation, but it's not beyond the wit of us to do something like that.
Is this something that we would consider at a later meeting, or something to be amended here?
We're at the stage where we're putting streetlights back onto Everest Ave. We're removing the hoarding. We're starting to work on the footpath. We're in the closing stages of Nainai. We're very close now to completion. Given that we're in the final stages, some certainty about what we tell the contractor to mark in the car park and along Everest Ave, I think would be appreciated by the contractor if he's to meet his deadline.
Councillor Mitchell.
I was just going to make the point here that, like the earlier one, this one will be coming up to full council on the 1st of October. So it is again something we could discuss further there if we're of a mind to and further information has come through. I don't think it needs any alteration to the recommendations today in order for us to do that.
So my view on this is that I'm hopeful that those 4 EV parks are full up every day, all day. Any other questions from the elected members? No, so I move the motion that subcommittee recommends that council approves items 1 to 7. Do I have a seconder? One question to come from councillor.
Yeah, sorry, I've just seen Yon's email come through. There was an elected member request about potentially moving the car parks so they weren't like the prime car parks. Obviously, the transformers are that Everest Ave end. Would it be the end of the world if they were on the other side of the car park, further away from the pool, but probably just as far away from the transformer, or does the cable, can the cable not run under the road, under the car park?
As I say, work is underway. We're taking hoardings down on Everest Ave. We're building the car park. The curb is in, the conduit's in. We're ready to do the install for Meridian. We could, as you say, move it across the other end of the car park, but there are dollars involved in that as a change. We did consider putting the EV chargers elsewhere in Nainai. That's probably one of the best places for it to go. I think if you recall, in the early days, back in 2018, 2019, that space was predominantly for staff. So those are new parks, those 28 additional parks, they're new parks. And it seemed if we're looking towards the future, then those would be the areas where we start to introduce new facilities.
And whereabouts is the Lockheed dock being planned to go?
We're under discussion at the moment with the suppliers of a Lockheed dock station that potentially could go along Everest Ave, potentially somewhere between the car park and reception, but probably not at the end, close to reception, because we have space there for 2 mobility parks with side exit, and the footpath is quite narrow, and putting a 2-metre wide locky dock up against the building will restrict the footpath. So we're looking at a location somewhere along Everest Ave. That's a fully costed media model, which means it costs council nothing to install other than supplying the power, but it needs to be located where that media panel works for the commercial supplier. We think we can get it in by the time we open, but at the moment I have to say it's probably 50-50. We know where it can go. We know we might be able to get it done by the time we're open, but we're 50-50, and if worst comes to worst, it isn't there for opening day, it will certainly be there within the next month or so, because we know where it can go, and we think the commercial model works for the supplier. Thank you.
So I'll start again. I would like to move items number 1 to 7. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parkin? Any debate? I've now put the motion, which is being moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much for your work. Item G, proposed new car park layout, Dowse Museum, Stevens Grove, Hutt Central, page 96 of the agenda, and officers at the table, Paul and Evandro, if you'd like to add to the paper, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report seeks approval for the new parking layout outside the Dowse Museum on Stevens Grove and Hutt Central. The intention was initially to move the mobility park to a more practical location for users of that park. This new set-out led to the opportunity to add motorcycle parking and formalised the police car parks as well. The current mobility park requires users to cross the car park or be in the car park when they're exiting the vehicle. So the relocation of the mobility park largely removes that risk. It is also proposed that the mobility park will be designated at all times. There is no net loss of parking through this proposal. There is just the gain of the motorcycle parking. Consultation took place between the 4th of July and 23rd of July 2024, covering a catchment area around 100 metres around the site, which included the Dowse and the police station. 10 consultation letters were delivered to residents and businesses, and no responses were received. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It's a rare thing to gain a car park. Does any member have a question? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And while I really love this report, guys, nowhere in here or in any other report that I've seen that mentions mobility users does it say that the disabled sector of our community has been consulted with. You have got in there that 10 businesses received letters. Were there any disabled people or disabled organisations that were consulted in this, and if so, who were they, please?
Thank you. The answer is no, they have not been consulted, provided that that's an existing car park facility. That's the reason why they have not been consulted.
Councillor Barrett.
Further on to that, I think that if I were to go out to the disabled sector now, the people that I know, they would ask this question of you, that no matter that it is just the moving of a car park, they would like to have some input, please. And I'm asking that that happens in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. Perhaps if we could get some contact details of people we should be consulting along these matters from you, we will ensure that we're consulting with the disabled going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Parkin.
I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Barrett's point. It is very important that we include the disabled community in our decisions. Any decision that we are making about a disabled part of our community should be made with them.
Any further questions? No. So I move the motion that Subcommittee recommends to Council approves items 1 to 4. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barrett. Is there any debate? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I was going to ask for an additional amendment that we ask our comms team to do a press release announcing that we've reinstated and added a new car park, because that very rarely happens. So, no, I joke, but you already raised the point. But yeah, just did want to note how good it is that this committee doesn't always just take things away.
True that. So now the motion's been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Item number 8, formalising the Beltway Cycleway Corridor as built, page 103 of the agenda. A very big paper here. Thank you for the extra work done on clearing the diagrams. I'm sure there's always work to be done, but appreciate the work behind this. Officer already at the table. Do you have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this report is just is for the subcommittee to formalise the existing restrictions on the Beltway Cycleway and seek approval for the implementation of some proposed new traffic controls and restrictions on the cycleway. Yeah, as referred, there is a considerable list of restrictions in this report, and I don't propose to go through them individually. The new markings proposed are broken yellow lines with no stopping all time restrictions and a new bus stop. Those broken yellow lines are on both sides of the road there. We've got pedestrian walk-offs and one on the opposite side of the road. A question was raised regarding the footpath on page 131. That's on the footpath on Rainy Grove. It's not really visible in the photograph. That footpath runs effectively parallel with the railway line, and it can be seen either side of there's a tree at the bottom of the page near the legend, and you can faintly see the footpath coming out either side of that tree. It feeds to the stairwell going up to the overbridge and then links into the shared path. There was no consultation undertaken as part of this paper, but we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I had a couple. Page 113. It was a question I asked at the pre-agenda meeting what the diamond is at the top map. Presumably it's for the crossing that's around the corner. But if you're going straight through, there is no crossing.
Correct. We can confirm that the diamond is for the referred crossing facility. Noting that diamonds are not mandatory to be installed in advance of a crossing. If noticed that will be a major issue, that can be instructed, contractors may be instructed to not proceed with the diamond. It's also, I would like to highlight that for traffic resolution purposes, diamonds would not be included in the approval of the plan.
Cool. I'm fairly comfortable letting officers decide, but for me, it's like if you're not turning left into Tyler Drive, you might think there's a crossing around the corner or a crossing somewhere on High Street and start slowing down. It would make sense if the diamond was right before the crossing, but the road splits, and if you go left, you'd hit the crossing. If you go right, you don't. So in my mind, it wouldn't be there, but I won't lose sleep over it. And then another question was on page 130, the bottom map, why we haven't proposed extending the yellow lines across where the bike lane comes onto Rainy Grove. As it is pictured, a car could park there and block the cycleway.
We are happy to make an amendment and implement the broken yellow lines on the opposite side of it. Thank you.
Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. Following on from Councillor Dyer's question about the pedestrian crossing warning, we've had a number of public comment about a pedestrian crossing that happens after you immediately turn around a corner and can surprise people. I can see this one raising a similar issue. Are there any traffic signs available to warn drivers and motorists that there is a pedestrian crossing coming up when they make a turn?
No, that's not in any of the traffic guidelines.
Councillor Mitchell.
there's not a crossing on side road combination you could put there. Quite often you see things about roadworks on the side road or things on the side road. I totally get the point. Waterloo Road's one we put in recently where cars going straight up Waiwhitu Road, turn around a corner and the crossing's right there. I don't know if there's anything we can do to advise them to expect that.
We are happy to review and seek advice from NZTA on that.
Councillor Mitchell.
I just had a question about, and forgive me if it's not a very intelligent question, but the use of giveaway signs on the cycleway itself. And there's an example at the top of page 114, but there's quite a few through there where there are giveaway signs for cyclists in both directions and a car in one direction, all on the same intersection, about whether we're confident that cyclists know who gives way to who in such a scenario, or do they give way to everyone, or I think this is quite new in our city anyway, that cyclists will know exactly how to behave there.
Thanks for that question. We did follow up with NZTA with regards to that. They have advised that the giveaway signs on cycle lanes are mostly for warning of cyclists, and the sign itself is smaller than the regular giveaway signs that are on intersections. In terms of traffic regulations, what is valid as per standard is the regular giveaway at an intersection. As I said, on cycle lanes, that's mostly an advisory signs to improve to improve safety for cyclists.
Yeah, so it's more just to raise awareness that they're crossing a road than telling them they have to give way to anyone in particular. Yeah, thank you.
Are there any questions? So before I move the motion, would you be happy to see these recommendations? Because there's a large number of them on the screen before we... Then I'll just move forward. I move the motion that the subcommittee recommends that council receives items number 1. Actually, I'll read these. 1, receives the notes report. 2, formalises the following changes along the entire section of the Beltway cycleway between High Street, Taita Drive and Waterloo Road. Items A-00. Number 3, approves the following changes along the entire section of the Beltway cycleway between High Street, Taita Drive and Waterloo Road. Items A/BB, and 4, notes that these parking restrictions will take place once the appropriate road markers have been approved. Wonderful work, everyone. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, happy to second it, just with the amendment to the one that I raised, which is sheet 19. So it must be recommendation W. If we could just amend that to say, with the amendment discussed at the meeting. So this is recommendation 2W. The installation of broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times, parking restrictions between 1102 High Street to the intersection of Rainy Grove, attached to sheet 19. Just add in there about the... yeah, maybe it's V.
We've made that amendment to W. Still moving block, items number 1 to 4. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mitchell. Is there any debate? Now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Item J, broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times. Thompson Grove, Stokes Valley, page 164 of the agenda. Would you like to speak to the paper, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report seeks approval from the subcommittee for the installation of broken yellow lines, no stopping at all time restrictions between 16 and 24 Thompson Grove and Stokes Valley, as shown in Appendix 1 of the report on page 167. A request was received by council officers from Waste Management Limited, who had concerns about the ability of large vehicles to turn in Thompson Grove with parked vehicles in the turning head. Vehicles parked in this area create a higher potential for crash risks when larger vehicles are manoeuvring in the area. Following a site visit, it was assessed that the installation of broken yellow lines would improve manoeuvrability of large vehicles and reduce this crash risk. Consultation took place between the 4th and 23rd of July 2024. 28 consultation letters were delivered to residents and there were no responses received. We welcome any questions.
Any questions? Fairly standard report. I move the motion that the subcommittee recommends that council approves items numbers 1 to 4. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Is there any debate? I've put the motion, been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against, say no. I declare the motion carried. Number K, broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times, Ariki Street and Ropata Crescent, intersection Bulcott, page 171 of the agenda. If you can add anything to the paper, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report seeks the subcommittee's approval for the installation of broken yellow lines, no stopping at all time restrictions at the intersection of Ariki Street and Ropata Crescent, as shown in Appendix 1 on page 174. Council officers received a request to improve the visibility for vehicles turning out of Ariki Street into Ropata Crescent. Both narrow roads and visibility is reduced when vehicles are parked near the intersection. Visibility checks were undertaken by council officers and they concluded that the extension of the existing broken yellow lines, as shown in Appendix 1, would improve the visibility and reduce accessibility issues. Just a clarification on paragraph 6, the intention there is to say that by not installing broken yellow lines outside numbers 17 and 19 would impact, or there'd be no impact by two turning vehicles coming out of Ariki Street there. Consultation took place between the 4th and the 23rd of July. 54 consultation letters were delivered to local residents and businesses. No responses were received. Thank you.
Any questions? Right, I move the motion. The subcommittee recommends that council approves items number 1 to 4. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parkin, is there any debate? I've got the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against, no. I declare the motion carried. Item number L, broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times, Timaru Grove, Kelson, page 177 of the agenda. Can you add to the paper, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report seeks the approval of the subcommittee for the installation of broken yellow lines, no stopping at all times restrictions between 15 and 21 Timaru Grove and Kelson, as shown in Appendix 1 on page 180. A request was received by council officers from Waste Management Limited, who had concerns about the ability again of large vehicles to turn and manoeuvre in the turning head of Timaru Grove. Where vehicles are parked in the turning head, there is the higher crash potential when large vehicles are manoeuvring in the area. Council officers have visited this site and conducted vehicle tracking checks and concluded that parked vehicles at this location do create an obstruction. And additionally, the narrow width of Timaru Grove, which drops to 5.5 metres, can hinder emergency vehicles, which has resulted in the broken yellow line recommendation extending further along Timaru Grove. The consultation took place between the 4th of July and 23rd of July. 21 consultation letters were delivered to residents. 5 responses were received. 4 were in favour and 1 was against. The one that was against was a resident who believed that broken yellow lines would not be effective in this location and was not in favour of the loss of parking. Officers are confident that the intended manoeuvrability outcome would be achieved by the installation of broken yellow lines at this location. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions? No, we're good to go. Move the motion. Subcommittee recommends. So, hand did go up. Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. I think officers have actually already answered it, but just for clarity's sake, the reason that this broken yellow line extends significantly further down the road is simply due to the narrowing of the road compared to the previous one that we've just approved.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's correct.
Any other questions? No? I move the motion. Subcommittee recommends that council approves items number 1 to 4. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dyer. Any debate? Got a motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Number 7, information item, the Traffic Subcommittee Forward Program 2024 and status update of approved traffic resolutions 2023 to 24 on page 184 of the agenda. And just before I put it out to members, appreciate the work that's gone around this, and I'm sure there's still some more work to go in there, but it does give us a little bit of a status update. Any members have a question, please? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, Chair, as you say, thank you for the work that's in there, and it's starting to look busy already, but I'm wondering, could we have on the upcoming options the mobility report? I think this probably should be coming back to this committee.
Thank you. In the next round of the 7th of November, our intention is to upgrade all mobility parking spaces to be operating at all times. We already started the work on this.
Councillor Parkin.
Yeah, I think that the mobility issue actually goes further than that. That what we were talking about was looking at whether or not the timeframes suit, and also, as already stated, please ensure that you're talking to the disability community about it.
Thank you, Councillor. We will definitely be consulting with the disability community with respect to that paper.
Any more questions? Right, I move the motion that the Subcommittee 1 receives and forwards the forward program for 2024 attached as Appendix 1 to the memorandum, and 2 notes the status update of approved traffic resolutions attached as Appendix 2 to the memorandum. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dyer. Motion has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against, say no. I declare the motion carried. Item number 8, questions. We've received no questions. We now move to item number 9, closing formalities, karakia whakamutanga, and that will go up on the screen. Join me in karakia, please. Unahia, unahia, unahia turu up tapunui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, i te ara takatū, koe rā e rongo whakarehia a ke kirunga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia, hau pai marere. I declare the meeting closed at 4:14. Thank you very much, and thank you for the work. A big pay